territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We acknowledge a shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. With respect to the agenda, there was one item added on waste management, which Council all received by email. So could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda as amended? Councillors Fury and Shell.
Be it resolved that the May 22nd, 2024 Haliburton County Council agenda be approved as amended.
All in favor? That's carried. Councillor Carter. TV travels. Is there any notice of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? I can't hear it. Okay. So can I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes from May the 8th? Councillors McKechnie and Burton. Thank you. There's no business arising from the previous meeting.
Motion for the minutes.
Go ahead.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Be it resolved that the minutes from the May 8th, 2024 meeting at Haliburton County Council be adopted as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. So we'll move into delegations. And this morning we welcome Pam Saini from the Roma board, who is going to give us an update on evolving advocacy and opportunities. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning and thank you. Good morning, Warden Danielson and Deputy Warden, councillors, staff, and voters in our democratic process here today. As most of you know, I'm Pam Saini, third-term councillor in Minden Hills and second term on the Rural Ontario Municipalities Association Board of Directors representing Zone 5. I want to thank you for affording me this time on your agenda today to highlight the work of your Rural Ontario Municipalities Association. I know that you often get email notices, updates, provincial policies, and work of AMO and Roma on your emails frequently, but the hazard of the job is there's always an over-inundated amount of information that you receive. So my intention today is to highlight some of the more recent evolutions of Roma and to encourage all of us in terms of our working together. Some of what I'm going to say is pretty self-evident and you're very aware of it, working as in the political field as long as many of you have. But I think it's still important sometimes just to acknowledge and say that each of us has likely noticed that our opinions and ideas are always taken more seriously when we're elected. And sometimes nobody cares what we think until we're elected. And then all of a sudden it becomes an important issue. And then everyone, we become fodder for our ideas. We become fodder for everyone who's given a moment's thought to something or a lifetime thought to something. And so we hear about that. And I got to say that that is the fundamental principle of democracy and participation, and that we put ourselves in these positions. And I think we need to acknowledge ourselves and the work that we do on occasion for this. And in doing that, I have to just say too that I'm a bit shell-shocked right now because I've come back from investigating and looking at countries that have experienced the far left in politics and the far right in politics. And it just shows what an important process that we have here and how much we need to guard our democracies. And I just don't think we say that enough in our everyday work that we do, or at least acknowledge that in many of our debates. But having said that, we have a lot of challenges that are new to us. And especially even over the last 4 years, the amount of work that municipalities have to do, the increased homelessness, mental health issues, aging, and a lot of the downloading of issues to the municipalities that often federal and provincial teams were working on. And so we have a lot of issues that are much more difficult than they ever have been in the past for municipalities. And along with that, with social media, we have a lot more polarization in our communities of not listening and hearing to people. And so Roma has been doing a lot of work around that, as you may recognize at one of our past conferences at Thea Raj from TV Ontario spoke on polarization at a previous conference and raised this issue. And I raise it here because what's so important to Roma's work is dialogue. And we can agree or disagree, but we need to continue the dialogue. And that is so fundamental to our democracy here within our communities and within our country as large as we are. So I wanted to just highlight that because it's something that we don't often acknowledge and say. The challenges of rural Ontario are not hypothetical or opinions. At Roma, we are engaging in evidence-based research to identify issues unique to rural communities and putting forward solutions. We are fighting the trends of polarization by encouraging dialogue, meaning listening to other speakers and speaking to our truths. As political leaders, we have the opportunity to preserve democracy through increased participation, policies, and programs that promote our basic needs. As we look at the slide presentation, and I called it evolving because we have evolved a great deal over the last little while. People remember when we were also having our annual conference with the Ontario Good Roads Association. We've separated from them with our conferences, have been going and doing some phenomenal work since then. But I wanted to give you a sense of what Roma is. So there we are, all hanging in the sky, trying to figure out what is our strategic plan. And up above, you'll see a picture of all the zones. So we have 10 zones, and you can see zone 5 is where we are. And we have 1 member per zone in each of these on the board, as well as members of the AMO Rural Caucus on our board. And so what we are doing is becoming a very active board. We meet at least monthly, and we developed a strategic plan. So we are a board of action. Our strategic plan is based on the information that we get from our communities. And as you can see, we hang together and looking down at all the different issues that we have, come up with our core values, our objectives, and then further that, how to implement those ideas. So if we go to the next slide, then it means all of us putting oars in the rowing together at the same time. So we have Roma's annual work plan and budget, which reflects our strategic plan. The Roma's annual report will be described on how this plan is being implemented. And the strategic plan will be reviewed in advance of the 2027 year when it concludes. So if we go to the next slide. So these are the implementation parts. Response to growing rural demands. We can see that broadband was a very important issue when we started in 2018, separate from OGRA. Then COVID hit, and we decided at that time to go with the Zoom meetings for the conferences.
Pam,
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're
worries.
still having I believe that we're still having an echo issue.
Okay,
Is it a problem for council? Because if so, we can just take a quick break and really and truly fix it or carry on.
I think it's fine. It's just a bit of an echo. It wasn't as bad as last time.
Okay, we'll carry on. Sorry for.
no,
the
that's
interruption.
fine. Thank you for the break. Appreciate. Okay, so yeah, so carrying on, then we had our conferences, which turned out to be very successful. We were happy that we carried them on by Zoom. It was important to do that. And then we started to look at issues such as the opportunity for rural Ontario in a post-COVID world. What changed? We know a lot of things changed with communications, with how we associated with people. It was very difficult times. So we did some research and came up with recommendations. And we also work with the Rural Ontario Institute and OMAFRA on gathering data and what was different about rural areas compared to urban Okay. Right, too much feeling, not enough IT here. So thank you, Warren Danielson, and I'll continue with the responses to the growing demands, research-based advocacy. Just to say that Rural Ontario Municipalities Association is really based on research, and our positions are researched, and that is the premise for what we do to move forward. A lot of the work that we have done around broadband early on in 2018, Alan Thomas was the president at that time. He forwarded a great deal of work and getting access and programs to rural Ontario. By 2030 is the rumor for those of us who are trusting in our IT to bring the broadband to rural areas by 2030. The other work that continues is during COVID, of course, we had Zoom meetings for conferences. That encouraged people to keep communications going and keep in touch with what was happening in other municipalities during that time of what we might even call like a lockdown. But it was a time that we all managed to get through, but it's left us with a kind of brave new world of IT and how we communicate and where we get our information from. And so some of the work that continues is our research on what do we do in a post-COVID world. And we also work with the Rural Ontario Institute. They have great information and sources of data if you go to their website about every community across Ontario. And we also work closely with the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture and Farming and Rural Affairs. The other work that we're doing is in the 2023, people have probably seen the task force report on attainable housing. This is a very important piece because it talks about how we structure our housing situations in our communities, that we're not just a hub and spoke model from larger municipalities, that we are within ourselves an operating entity, and we're not just an extension of urban areas. And that's something that has to be thought about as we create our modeling for moving forward in our development. The other research that we undertook called Filling the Gaps Closer to Home, Improving Access to Services for Rural Ontario, and particularly looking at the healthcare crisis and mental health and the closing of our emergencies throughout the province, and how some of the policies and the programs are, of course, devastating for both urban and rural, but increasingly worse for the conditions in rural areas. And so our reports are all online under the Rural Ontario Municipalities Association website for further look at that and for any feedback that you'd like to provide me or our board on those issues. Some of the other programs and actions, I think this might be repeated, but I think it needs to be on air. Is that correct? So I'll repeat some of the items that we have. Of course, our primary activity is our annual conference where we had over 1,900 people attend our last one. We had delegations from before the conference started till afterwards, delegations meeting that through our memorandum of understanding, the province had their ministers and their minister staff meeting with delegations across rural Ontario and hearing the voices of why rural is different than urban. A very important process for making sure the policies work for us. Another thing that we are organizing are the teeny tiny summits, and we work with OMAFRA on doing those teeny tiny summits in various rural areas, and I'll speak more about one coming up here soon. The other is our increased media presence. So, you know, if a tree falls in the dark, does anybody hear it? Well, we want to make sure that it's on X, that it's on our website, that it's on LinkedIn and all of our other social media platforms so people begin to understand and hear the real voice. It is not a tree just falling where no one can hear it, because our situations are very unique and policies and programs that fit urban areas do not fit rural areas, nor are all the rural areas alike as well. The other commitment that we made is a $15,000 per year for 5 years to establish post-secondary awards. And we've done that through the University of Guelph, Lakehead University, and Trent University. These are strong roots of rural community universities. And so this is to help third and fourth year students in their programming. And so we have found ways to keep the voice of the rural out there and build it even stronger through some of these programs. We've increased dialogue with the rural zones. We do that also through the plowing matches and through other conferences that rural members will be attending. And we continue dialogue and consultation with the provincial government on ongoing policy changes. And as I mentioned earlier, the provincial changes in policies and zoning and some of those keep coming out faster than our staff can keep up with. So a lot of kudos to our planning staff that managed to keep up with these changing policies and reversals. But hopefully through better dialogue, we won't have these continual changes. The other thing that I wanted to mention was the work that we're doing. It's one of our legal initiatives that we rarely, or this is the first time actually, we've undertaken a issue on. It's called the Drainage Act, where railroads are responsible for the drainage for the rail lines. This is something that's affecting communities with the rail lines going through and are expected to pay for the infrastructure to control the drainage. But under the Drainage Act, which is provincial, railways are responsible for that, not our ratepayers and taxpayers of those different communities. The reason we took this on was because this can also apply to other places like hydro, for example. If hydro decides that they're going to clear along the roads and then they're not going to take away the brush, that falls on our municipalities. So this is a really important precedent-setting initiative that we've taken on. And we've taken this legal action on with the Federations of Canadian Municipalities as well, FCM. So we are working with them and sharing the lawyer to support these communities. Because as you know, we don't just take on individual situations in communities. They have to be something that has a broad effect across all rural areas. And I know Jean Anthon, who worked very hard on this Drainage Act long ago, is quite surprised to see that we're still dealing with this act, but it just shows you how persistent some large corporations can be. So the next area I'll just raise is our supportive networks. We work with LAS. One of the things that I'll be personally working with is to find better ways of saving better interest rates and addressing some of our issues. Maybe it's around transportation or maybe it's around better communications with LAS to see how they can be of better service to rural areas. That's coming out of our strategic plan for these coming couple of years. We are supporting OGRA, the Ontario Good Roads Association, and taking the lead to build safer highways through Ontario. So we have, at our 2 board meetings ago, supported OGRA and their proposal to take on this activity. We also work with the Rural Ontario Institute. They have an incredible amount of data for across Ontario and our communities, very important for housing developments or whatever we might be looking at doing, and encouraging networking and sharing strategy among politicians, particularly through our conferences. So the information is on our site. If you go to our strategic plan, you can see some of the work that we're doing there. But most importantly, I want to jump to the slide that says Teeny Tiny Summit. And this is coming up on June 6th. So I'm hoping that everyone from Haliburton will have the opportunity to come to this event. I want to thank the county staff, Steve and Angelica, for their participation in organizing this with OMAFRA. We have a special speaker, Peter Kenyon, from the Bank of Ideas. He's coming from Australia, and he will be there. So please go online, sign up for this day. I encourage everyone across the county and beyond to attend this day and this opportunity to hear from other people, brainstorm, and talk locally without IT in our way. So please come to that. Of course, IT will be there, our staff helping us with all of the IT things, but this is an opportunity to meet in person and to help solve problems and to help get encouraged to move forward. So I think on that note, if there's any errors in this presentation, I'll blame it on 2 weeks of jet lag, and thank you for your time.
Thanks very much, Pam. Questions or comments for Pam? One comment I would like to make is that I found that during the conference, because there's so much time going to delegations, that there's not enough time to go to the breakout sessions. And in fact, I have gone to several Roma conferences where I have been able to attend absolutely zero of the breakout sessions, which is really disappointing to me. So I'm just wondering if there can be some thought about this, the scheduling and timing. I know that you say that the ministers are listening to us. I might have a discussion with you about that, about how much they are listening to us. But you know, I mean, it is a good opportunity to meet and bring issues forward to the ministers. But at the same time, you want to be able to participate in the entire conference. So just a comment to be thought about by the board. I wonder also if you put out a survey or a questionnaire about the type of sessions that people are looking for?
Yes, thank you for those comments. Yes, your comments will be taken back and looked at, and that is an issue when people are being pulled in too many different directions. They want to be participating with their delegates in some of the discussions as well as lobbying. It's hard to do everything all at once. I don't have the answer for that, but it certainly isn't the first time we've heard that one. I also want to thank some of the council members that have attended, not necessarily in this room, but in some of our four municipalities, and the comments that we received back about making sure that we're addressing, we have many two-tier organizations and municipalities, and people felt there was too much focus on the second tier and not enough at the local tier in terms of our workshops. So that is something too that we've taken back and our conference organizers have taken note of and we'll be looking at for the next conference. So any kinds of other input that you have like that, we only have so much time, so we can only do so much, but we're pleased that they are attended well, and if we can make them even more effective, and that would be great. Thank you.
Councillor Fury.
By the way, thanks for your presentation, Pat. Is Roma doing anything about the assessment? Like we're really getting hammered in rural Ontario, especially cottage country, where people that have been assessed in the last 2 or 3 years are much closer to market value compared to the ones that were assessed 7 or 8 years ago. It's a huge
Absolutely.
issue and it's unfair taxation. And I would think that you'd have some clout in convincing the government to move forward.
We don't have as much clout as I wish we did. We do have open dialogue. This is good. Yeah, we are working on that. We are finding this delay in impact reevaluation is a problem across Ontario. And so it is something that our policy people continue to work on. We continue to get updates on that, but it's not off our radar, even though I didn't mention it today. There are many things here that we get regular reports back on that our policy folks are working on, and that is certainly one of them. So thanks for raising that, because every time we raise it, it just brings it, it's like talking rural, keep it loud, right? Thank you.
Our CAO and then Councillor Rao.
Thank you, Warden Danielson. Just for council's information and for the presenter's information, MPAC representatives will be here at our next council meeting to talk about process, and that it's a very good question to put to them and their dialogue with the province for much needed updating of the assessment across the province.
Good news. Councillor Rao.
I'll hold my question to that meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Any other, Councillor Carter.
Technology challenges. So I think it's really important that we do whatever we can to listen to and to support Roma. As we heard, I think it was at the last meeting, and we heard it that, the funding from the senior levels of government, for instance, for housing, it's well in excess of 90% are going to large centers. you know, and so the amount of money that's coming from the senior levels of government into the rural areas is way less than we need and way less than we, in all fairness, should be getting. And I think that, you know, particularly since many of our costs are higher because we don't have the water and sewer and infrastructure you know, that you would have in cities or in and around cities. So I think Roma plays an extremely important role. And you know, we need to do all we can to continue to support it, to make sure that our voice is heard. So thank you.
Yes, thank you. And just to say thanks for that question, because that is something very fundamental that we need to look at in this province, is how municipalities are funded, because we have an increased download of issues, homelessness growing, mental health issues, and our municipalities at a local level are trying to address increasing amount of downloading of other items as well. And this cannot keep up with the present funding formula. So we need to do a re-evaluation of how municipalities receive the funding and on what basis, and how do we increase that to meet the increased needs. That is a fundamental question that needs to be re-evaluated. The old system is no longer working. The infrastructure monies are just not there to keep up with what we have in our growing needs of municipalities. Bottom line, our ratepayers cannot continue to take the downloading, and we need to find another formula. So that is an important discussion. Thanks for raising that. Thank you.
Councillor Ryle.
The other thing too is as you may not be familiar, is we're in the process of a health unit merger here.
Yes.
And if there's any way you could influence the province to be a little bit more expeditious and clear on the rules of engagement for doing what we need to do. A lot of the stuff is got such short timelines on it that it's going to be almost, well, it is going to be impossible to meet all the deadlines that have been set by the province, and it's in the province's court. Basically, what we've done is we've supplied them with the information, and then you hurry up and wait. And at the end of the day, the deadlines come, and to my knowledge, they're not being extended. So I don't know if Roma can do anything in that, but again, it's because it does affect the HKPR and the Peterborough Health Unit.
Yes,
In our area.
it does. And it's one of those problems where we're seeing new regulations and then not a way to carry them out, and then deadlines, and it's not working. And we do have to get some more realistic planning ability in there. On the specifics of what we're dealing with here, if there's any specifics, let's talk, shoot me an email or something so we can raise that as well. But it is a problem when we have all these changing regulations, and then we are given deadlines, but then there's no clear way about how we move forward. And that delays everybody across the board. So thanks for raising that, particularly around healthcare.
Any other comments or questions? Well, thanks once again.
Thank you.
Presentation much appreciated. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the delegation? Councillors Carter and Fury.
Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the updates from Councillor Pam Swaney on behalf of and Roma Board Member Pam Swaney on behalf of Roma, the Rural Ontario Municipal Association.
All in favor? That's carried. Our second delegation today is in recognition of the fact that this is Paramedic Services Week. Rapidly on the heels of First Responders Day, where we did make a proclamation about first responders. We'd like to recognize the work that our paramedics do on behalf of us all. And I understand that Chief Waite has the Deputy Chief David Dasty and paramedics Jeff Ryan and Sean Foster here to do a bit of a demonstration. Over to you, Chief Waite.
Thank you, Warden Danielson and members of council. So today, again, is Paramedic Services, part of Paramedic Services Week. It starts Sunday and ends Saturday. And it's a week to just recognize what the paramedics do out there, but also an opportunity for the paramedics to showcase what they do. So today, Dave is just going to be setting some stuff up real quickly because we'll keep rolling along. We're going to present to you a cardiac arrest scenario. This is a call the paramedics do. It's a low frequency call, but high acuity call. Probably 75 times a year, our entire fleet responds to a call such as this. You'll see that it incorporates many challenges. And Dave, if you can just want to set it in the middle there. So I'm going to try and set the scenario up. We decided this is going to be, I'll try and get you a mental picture. This is going to be Head Lake Park. And we're going to make it as realistic as we can. And if all my technology works, it will be, it should come off fairly well. So Dave will be represented as a bystander. So the white shirt comes off and he's just a bystander in Head Lake Park. Our paramedics are standing by. Their response will be quicker than probably a normal response would be, as by the time the call comes in. And I know that from being on scenes, waiting for an ambulance, it seems like it takes forever, even though it may only be a few minutes. But we do have the paramedics standing by. Hopefully it all works here. So I'm going to actually make the call to dispatch. They're prepared for my call. We've created it to be not go directly to 911, but to one of the supervisors on staff who will act as a 911 supervisor and take all the information as it would be on an actual call. So again, I leave it that this is our patient and Dave is just a citizen walking in Head Lake Park. So Dave, I'll leave it with you and
Just start this scenario and we can find a call, right?
yes, I'll be your bystander that you happens to come along to. Hey, is everything all right there?
Oh, sir, can you call 911 and see if you can find an AED for me, please? I have a patient that,
Okay.
What is the emergency?
Hi, it's Tim and Haliburton. I'm calling regarding the mock 911 call.
Sure. Where do you need the ambulance?
We have a collapsed patient in Head Lake Park in Haliburton.
Okay. Do you know the address or an intersection?
Closest intersection would be Highland Street and York Street.
Okay. Yes, I have it here. And the telephone number with the area code you're calling from?
705-457-8728.
Okay. And is the person awake?
No,
They're not awake. Are you able to wake them up?
not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And my partner is starting the ambulance right now. Do you know if they're breathing?
I don't think so. The person that found the patient said said they collapsed and called 911.
Okay. And you have the phone close to him, do you?
I do, yes.
Okay.
Driver Township at York Street and Highland Street, York and Highland at the Head Lake Park. Responding there for a male that collapsed, not breathing, DSA, code 4.
Sorry, I missed that.
That's okay.
Okay.
Do you know if there's a defib available?
I'm looking for one, but I haven't been able to find one yet.
That's okay. So in the meantime, I want you to get the phone close to the patient.
Yes,
Okay, I'm going to walk you through the instructions then, okay?
sure.
So just get the phone close to the patient, have him on a firm, flat surface on his back.
Yes, I'm standing beside I'm standing beside the person right now. He's doing some chest compressions.
Okay, perfect. So with the heel of one hand in the middle of his chest, you have to let the chest rise and fall between the compressions though.
Okay,
Okay, and you're going to do it 200 times.
okay,
Okay, you're going to push fast and push hard with no interruptions.
okay.
Okay, I can either count with you or I can stay on the phone. Can you just let me know when the person gets back with the defib as well?
Sure, okay. I'm the guy looking for the defib. I haven't been able to find it yet, so I don't think there's one here.
Okay, that's okay. We're gonna keep going with the chest compressions then until the paramedics arrive. Is somebody else there with you as well?
Okay.
Are you by yourself or is someone else able to help you?
If there's someone else there, he's doing CPR.
Okay, so it's good sometimes when you want to alternate every 2 minutes.
Okay.
It is fast and exhausting.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got the ambulance on the way. Whereabouts in the park are you?
Just down by the lake. Yeah, down more by the lake shore.
By the lake?
I'll watch for the ambulance.
Is there a parking lot that we can use?
Yes, there is.
Okay, so just let me know when the ambulance arrives, okay, there.
Oh, I see an ambulance arriving here right now.
Direct them to where the patient is and just keep the CPR in progress until they take over with their equipment, okay?
Okay. Yes, they're with the patient now.
Okay, perfect. I will disconnect.
Okay, thank you. Bye now.
Today? Are you okay doing some more CPR in the water? Let's get it. I'll do it. Okay, keep doing CPR. We're gonna put some pads here. This is Holly, you said? And no Holly? Yeah, okay, is there any family or anything around there? Or can you just like, I'm going to by yourself? Okay, well, we're gonna do the CPR water. 6 minutes, okay, call Jack. Okay, keep it. John will. Let's charge, I'll do CPR. Okay. Everybody's clear, jogging, can you continue CPR?
So just to highlight, they've given one shock because the patient was in a shockable rhythm. And now part of the protocol is 2 minutes of CPR, and then they'll reevaluate the rhythm.
So 10 o'clock, if you're actually for patient, I'll set up your tree. Up. Okay. We've got 45 seconds for the next patient.
So they've just inserted a supraglottic airway to help ventilate the patient.
Good. 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 Continue CPR. Okay, 20 seconds until our next interpretation. Yeah. We'll switch out here in 15 seconds. Okay, stop CPR. Pulse check. No pulse. Continue CPR.
So after the 2 minutes, they've evaluated the rhythm a second time, and it was non-shockable this time, which means two things. They've either three things. They've either regained a pulse. There's a rhythm without a pulse, meaning it's pulseless electrical activity, or it's asystole, which is in the TV programmings, that's their flat line. So in this case, there is a rhythm showing on the screen, but there's no output from the heart. So it's pulseless electrical activity.
Okay, 10:02. Yep, 10:02. And we have it entitled. Good. How's that for a while? 5 seconds, we need you to take over start walking here. We'll get a shot of the transport after.
And it's important to rotate your person doing chest compressions because it's very exhausting. They recommend every 2 minutes. If you have the people available to put a different person on doing the chest compressions, or they become, you end up being a lot shallower, a lot slower, and they're not as effective. And because we have 3 people here, we have the opportunity, they are going to start an IV, just in case it's needed, during the call. If they were successful in getting a pulse back, their protocols call for a possible fluid bolus, just to increase the blood pressure while the heart's recovering.
Seconds. Hold jab. Nope, let's beat the shockable. Charge. CPR. Switch. Watch the end title after. Up here. With a spike in end title. Check for a pulse. Okay. I have no radio, but we haven't got it. Okay. We're gonna start a fluid boil. We're gonna start the transport. You're good there on the airway. So I'll get two.
So in this case, they were, that defibrillation was successful. They've detected a pulse, so now it's rapid transport and continue ventilations and monitoring that pulse rate. They are going to give a fluid bolus en route to increase the blood pressure.
Go and back one. Good. Let's get a collar on that. Good.
So you'll notice we're using a scoop stretcher, not one of our power stretchers. And this is the scenario we often encounter as paramedics. There is an elevator here, but the stretcher doesn't fit in the elevator. So our alternative is to use a scoop stretcher and carry them down the stairs.
Get a set of vitals here. You're getting that. I'm gonna get blood pressure. Still got a strong carotid here. Good. That you're good. Gonna give this speed now. Just squeeze that bag lightly every 5 seconds.
So just prior to transport, they're going to try and get an initial set of vitals to see where the status of the patient, and possibly get set up for a 12 lead ECG. And the 12 lead, the purpose of that is to see if it's looking for ST elevation. That would describe that it is a not just the cardiac arrest is possibly caused from a myocardial infarction.
Pressure. Good pulse. Good carotid. We have a blood pressure now. Stats are good. End tidal is good. Good entry. Got it. Start transport. We'll apply at the hospital and we'll try to get orange. You're gonna go left. Here. You want to take our monitor. Wait. Stay.
So as you can see on a scene like this, especially when they can't get the stretcher to the patient, there's lots of equipment to remove. So we look for all hands on deck, any bystanders to assist. This is where fire department comes in very handy.
Well done, guys.
So we'll end the scenario there and quickly tidy up. I'll just get Jeff and Sean to just pop back in if you have any questions for them.
You had an extremely helpful bystander.
It was very good. He obviously passed his first aid course and CPR course.
Yeah, if the guys want to come back in.
Yeah. Yes, I was just going to get them to step back in shortly.
Tim, can I ask you? Can I ask?
Hang on just a second.
If you want to have So, ward members of council, this is Sean Foster and Jeff Ryan, two of our paramedics, and they were our pros on the scene. So if you have any questions.
Questions from council? Councilor McKechnie.
Yeah, I play a lot of golf and guys are kind of, you know, a little getting up there in age. And if somebody went down and they like collapsed and but they were still conscious, would it be safe, like some of the guys carry the aspirins? Would it be a good idea?
It will depend, like that will be based on the dispatch information, like whether they're having testing or showing stuff or whatever required during collapsing, if there's still collections. Most important thing there is waiting till the ambulance actually gets to you and not trying to drive that person.
Okay.
The questions, Councillor Dayu.
That was fascinating. Thank you. Based on our geography, how often is it that you really struggle to find the patient? And are you working with systems like What Three Words or other devices that we as council can help to spread the word around so that people have a better capacity to tell you where they're located?
Sean's used the What Three Word before. It's not something that's part of our protocols or directives right now. I would say probably for the most part of the time, we can find who we're looking for. You'll notice when you did the 911 call, the dispatcher will always send someone to go wait for the ambulance or flag us down. But there are times that we drive around looking for them. Cottagers that are up there that don't know the actual address. And with no landlines now, like landline phones, everything's cell phone, so it's just a drop off the nearest tower. Whereas when you're calling from a landline, it gives us the exact location as to where you're located.
Any other questions? I know, fellas, that we did do a proclamation at our last meeting on first responders, but there aren't enough words for me to say on behalf of council about how much we appreciate the work you do, how involved it is, and the impact that it has on you in a long term. So we really, again, appreciate the work that you do and can't thank you enough. This was an excellent demonstration and much appreciated. So thank you to you all. I think after that trauma, wondering whether the patient was going to live or not, we'll take a 10-minute break. Welcome back, everyone. I think before we go any further, our CAO would like to do a bit of an introduction.
Thank you, Warden Dennison. I think for council and the public, I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Purcell, our new Director of Planning. Brings a wealth of experience from the general area here as well as from the private sector as well. So we're very happy to have her on board so I can stop doing planning work. It's great. Thank you.
Welcome, Elizabeth. No speech? No, I'm just kidding. No, we're really glad to have you. So next is a report on information technology, which is an interesting day to have that report.
Good morning, Warden Danielson, members of council. Before you today is my standard monthly IT status report, just giving council an update on the projects currently underway in the IT department. Don't have anything to bring to your attention specifically. I think all the details in there about where most of these projects are at, but I'm always happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mike? Hearing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the IT status report? Councilors Burton and McKechnie.
Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information the May 22nd, 2024 IT status report.
All in favor? That's carried.
Thank you.
We've seen you in action today, so we know you're doing a good job. Next up is economic development and tourism. Good morning, Mr. Ovell.
Good morning, Warden and members of council. So just the first report in front of you today is just a report that summarizes the response that we received to the transit RFP that we issued to operate between Minden and Haliburton. Obviously, we noted is the response we received even on any one of the three options that were provided is significantly higher than what currently exists in the reserve. We do also outline the evaluation matrix and just an overall overview of the proposal overall. And then also contained within there is just some correspondence that has come out of Good Roads, just around some municipalities in Ontario requesting that the province take over, at least step in and provide some additional guidance on rideshare programming within rural Ontario. And I just note in the report, as I get a bit more information on that, I'll report back to council at a later date with just a little bit more clarification around that legislation. And happy to field any questions.
A bit of a shocking price. Say, questions, comments? Councilor Carter.
Well, first of all, I can't begin to express how disappointed I am in this for a number of different reasons. I know there's not universal acceptance from council that that this would necessarily be something for everyone because it's only running between, or the thought was only to run between Minden and Haliburton. However, you can't build a house without a foundation, and you needed a spine to get it started. And hopefully once this was started, then it could spread out into Highlands East and Algonquin Highlands and so on. This is one of the things that municipalities do, is transit. And it is something that we have kicked around for, and I wasn't here for all those years, but I read about it. We've kicked this around for years and done little or nothing about it. The idea in previous attempts often was this idealistic thought that we would be able to create everything for everybody. And when I last September or so made the notice of motion to bring this up, this was to do a bare bones starting point, get something started and see if we can make it grow. The idea was not to run services that also included wheelchair access and all of the extras. It was the it was the starting kit, you know, the beginner's model that we needed to try to create. And the idea was not necessarily to run 2 vans or 2 buses, but to run one. So I'm disappointed that, you know, this was what was put forward. This was, you know, way more than the original concept. And that's part of the reason for the cost. It also doesn't look at what the potential is in terms of ridership, because obviously this wasn't going to be a free service. There would be at least a certain amount of revenue that would come from it. I did not expect that it was going to make money, but I don't think that we have made the attempt that we need to make. Every day I hear about people who have difficulties with transportation. The idea of our taxis, the idea of these rideshare programs, okay, they're terrific in the city. Have used them a lot. But, you know, if you have somebody here who is looking to go to a medical appointment or to perhaps have a job where they need to be moving at certain times of the day, it was this idea of having a shuttle service that would be working on a schedule, and so that people could know what it is that they could achieve. How could they get to Haliburton? How could they get to Minden? How could they get to the job? So this is something that is needed not only by our people, but by all of the organizations that are having difficulty in getting employees and so on. So from my perspective, you know, I don't, I obviously see the result, but I don't accept it. And, you know, I think we should strike a committee to look at how to make this happen. You know, in my life, if I've faced with problems that I can't solve, it's because I haven't worked hard enough to try to solve it. And there is a way to do it. So I think we need to, you know, put together some committee, and I'd be willing to serve on that committee to try to come up with something that is a start for transportation in Haliburton County, because this is not it.
Gary, go ahead.
Thank you, Warden Danish. It's you to Councillor Carter. I appreciate your comments and the frustration on putting this forward. Transit in rural areas is hard. And I'm not saying it's insurmountable, but it's hard. But one thing, a couple things I'd like to keep in mind is that the RFP that was put out, the scope of work was approved by council. So that's what was followed when went forward. So I'm not surprised at the value it came in at, just from my experience in dealing with things. However, having said, there's a couple other things to keep in mind, I think, going forward. Yes, bring a group together to look at alternatives that go forward for transit in the rural area. I think that's a great idea to move forward. The rideshare program, I wouldn't discount it as that quickly. Other small rural municipalities have invested in the rideshare programs to great effect. Prince Edward County, they went from, they initially supported the rideshare program to $50,000 a year to allow vulnerable sector people to have access primarily for medical appointments into the hospital. To the success point now, they've actually been able to back off their support down to $30,000 a year into the current budget structure. So there is an opportunity to do that. With respect to even point to point, the concept of a single bus doesn't work. Forgive me, I don't know how to say that, because if the downtime is you have one bus going, and then how do people get in, because appointments are spread out through the whole course of the day. But there are ways to look at it. The aspect of the accessibility piece, I think, is valuable, because given the sector we're trying to serve with respect to access to the buses, you will need to have an accessibility component to it as well. But I think all this thing in play is, from a mandate perspective, given the cost impacts and what we're trying to achieve, and everything adds money, is what is the mandate we want to serve? If we're looking to get people back and forth to work, that's a different demographic. We're trying to get people to access medical appointments or access medical services between Minden and Haliburton. So I think the RFP response was in response to what was approved going forward. But I think there's an opportunity for us to keep not stopping, but going forward and keep looking at, okay, what can we achieve as a first phase? What can we look at expanding going forward? Because I think it is worthwhile doing it. It's just what methodology we're going to use to go forward.
Councillor Carter?
Well, I don't think that, we as council approved exactly what was going out. But certainly many people go to medical appointments who aren't in wheelchairs. You've only assigned 2.5 points to AODA compliance here, so it wasn't altogether that important in the total review of this. Like I said, the idea was to create the starter kit, to get something going. And, I use the example of somebody going to work, but it's going to medical appointments, it's going to the grocery stores, it's going to wherever. And, we may not be able to afford everything that we would like. But if we can get it started and it will grow. I know it's a little bit of if you build it, they will come. But, I think that this is something that we incredibly need in this area. It's one of the things that is noted in almost every social service and every document that we have, and it's about the lack of transportation in the area. I don't suggest that these rideshare programs are hopeless. I see that as maybe something in the future. But, I think we need to start right at the basics. And yeah.
Just a couple of comments. I do appreciate your frustration. I take a little bit of offense at your saying that nothing has been done. Because we have been looking at this for years. There have been working groups established. There have been studies that have been done. We have funded small trials in efforts to try and see how things would work. In almost every case, it's proven to be cost prohibitive given our geography. We did see and agree to the RFP for this project. Maybe we didn't pay enough attention to it. I'm not sure. I do agree that a working group going forward may be the answer, but I would look to other members of council for comments. Because to my mind, at this point in time, in excess of $700,000, and I would say $700,000 that we don't have to serve 2 of the 4 municipalities in the county is not appropriate. Councillor Shell.
Thank you. I would agree that a working group going forward would be a good idea. And like when Councillor Carter did first bring this up, it wasn't to go both ends. And I think if there was a transportation plan in place, if somebody that needs to have an appointment at the doctor's office up in Haliburton that lives in Minden, they would say, okay, I know that the pickup in Minden is at this time. So when I'm reaching out to my doctor's office, okay, I need my appointment to be at 2 p.m. because I can leave Minden at 1:30 or that kind of thing. So I think a working group is a good idea to maybe nail down something.
Other comments? Councillor Dayu?
I also fully support the working group. It's a nut that simply has to be cracked. And I think we should establish a committee until the nut gets cracked. And I would really support looking into rideshare and rural Uber and those sorts of things, because that is the kind of model that could arguably be extended into Highlands East and Algonquin Highlands. I'm not sure the point-to-point was ever going to work for us. And I do get very much that the concept was a starting point, but I think we would have had to shift models eventually for the other 2 municipalities. So let's start cracking that nut again. Because as you say, there's been work done, but we're not done yet.
Councillor Fury.
I'm in agreement with the working group. I think we need to develop the criteria how this is going to work. The problem, one of the difficulties here is, and I've talked to people that are in the transit business, is that you can't drop them off in Minden at a central location where they can take a bus or take a subway to their home. everywhere you have to take them is back to their house. And that's what complicates the matter and takes the time, but I'd sure be interested in trying to help. I know where Councillor Carter's coming from. Like you say, it's been around here for 15 years and everybody wants to do it, but we just can't get a handle on where to start and how we can finance it. So,
Afford it.
Yeah.
So I would look for thoughts on how a working group might be created and who should be included. Because I don't necessarily think that it should just be a group of members of council. We've had a lot of outside bodies working on this for over the years, and there was a fairly substantial transportation working group in the past that came from other groups and organizations. Councillor Dayu?
There has been, but in the intervening couple of years since there hasn't been an active working group, the technology has just burst through the gates on, on ride shares and those sorts of things. So I think there's got to be, at a first moment, a bit of a leveling up of information about what's available. Perhaps reaching out to Prince Edward County and finding out more information about their program could be a good first step to get us up to at least where the technology can take us.
I do know that our Economic Development Department has, over the last couple of years, looked at all kinds of different programs that have been offered. And I'm sure that there's a certain amount of a file, let's say, on that.
Through your word, yeah, this really also is just a matter of kind of procurement process. We essentially almost have to close the loop on this RFP process before we can start reaching out to other transportation providers. So it's, kind of the one option we outlined is, I know that the response is disappointing and obviously higher than we had hoped. But it's not to say that, staff is just going to then move on and not focus on this, but we do have to close this just from a strictly procurement standpoint. And then we can begin trying to work with other providers. I know prior to the RFP going out, we had really kind of preliminary conversations with the service in Bancroft. But again, once the process starts, we basically have to kind of stop all contact we have with anyone in the space to make sure that the responses that we get are acceptable and we can't be, criticized or potentially open ourselves to further litigation. So I'm happy to have those conversations and follow whatever direction council provides to us to keep this going and explore other options.
Thank you, Councillor Carter.
And in terms of a group, I think, the analogy of the nut to crack is very well founded here. Look, it obviously it can be some people from council, some staff. I would reach out to the Chamber of Commerce. They're the ones who talk about trying to get workers and so on, and then perhaps through our Jack committee, one of the somebody from there, because that transportation is brought up time and time again when we're talking about housing and homelessness and all those things. So yeah, that's sort of what I would see. And Triple HS is running 2 shuttle buses, in the area because of they're taking people for kidney dialysis treatments and so on. I sort of see if they can figure it out, I would hope that we could figure it out somehow. So,
But we're looking to serve a much larger group of people. I think one thing that we can all agree to is that this particular proposal is not acceptable to us. And I think that what we'd like to bring forward is a resolution asking staff to look at membership and establishing a terms of reference for a working group and bring it back to our next meeting, if that would be suitable for everyone. Councillor Royale?
Yeah, I sat on that committee, which was about 8 to 10 years ago. And it was a very, very internally productive committee. The bad news is that every time something came out of it, it just, again, expensive, feasible, not feasible rather. But what I'm thinking is that before we reinvent the entire organization, which to me is probably going to have to be upgraded to reflect 2024 and not 2014, 15, whatever it was, that we should try to gather as much of the information that they generated at that time so that we got a place to start from, as opposed to let's go and reinvent the whole thing. I'd like to go out and get some of the information that who was on that committee, how did the committee operate, what subjects they had looked at that particular point in time, arguments, and most of the arguments that were given were not technological. They were related to distance. They were related to the ability to get from one place to another and the challenges that were involved with the various vehicles and venues that were capable of being done. There has to be notes of all of that somewhere because county, I think paid for most of it. So there must be a file somewhere with all that stuff.
There is. There's reports, there's.
So if we're going to form a committee, why don't we start by looking there and see why it failed for one thing.
Well, I think we'll start with a resolution to look at a terms of reference, to dig out the information and bring something back for our next meeting. Other comments? You want to hear the resolution?
Thank you. And so the pros resolution would be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receive for information staff report EDT 05-2024 Minden Haliburton Transit Service RFP response, and further that the transit service RFP not be accepted, and further that a transit working group be established, and that the CAO be directed to develop a draft terms of reference for the working group for council's review and consideration at the June 12th meeting of County Council.
So that's moved by Councillor Fury, seconded by Councillor Carter. All in favor? That's carried. Thanks so much, Scott. Next, you want to talk to us about physician recruitment?
Yes, thank you. And Wendy does send her regards. She's just under the weather today. So, and just a quick note, she notified me late yesterday that what Kinmount was looking at about splitting some of their incentive over our part-time physicians, they're no longer doing that. So that's just a note in the report. And really what we're here for today is we've just been getting a lot of inquiries from prospective physicians, as a lot more jurisdictions in Ontario, and we outline that in the report, are getting into this space. And we're obviously getting physicians, particularly now that international physicians can work in Canada a little bit easier and the process is simplified. Just asking about years of service, the ability of perhaps stacking funding and items like that. So as our physician recruitment guidelines are currently structured, they're fairly rigid around that. So anytime we're getting questions in that space, it just requires us to come back to council, and you've been very supportive of any requests we've made. But what we're looking for really particularly related just to the ability to stack funding. So perhaps doing 50 years or 50,000 in one year and subsequently 25 in another. And then the return to service agreement. Those seem to be the two questions that we get inquiries about the most. So I know the request for delegated authority is a little different for us, but if we could just get those two items added in, or be given the permission to amend the physician recruitment guidelines with those two items, I think that would still give us the flexibility to make decisions and be responsive to doctors in that space. And then subsequently still bring those agreements back to council for your final review and approval.
Thank you for this. I think it's quite obvious that we need some more flexibility with respect to our incentive program. It's been in place for quite some time. And, it's so competitive that I'm sure that we really do need to do something. So I personally would welcome an updated set of guidelines, including the flexibility that you recommended. I would see some delegation of authority to yourself with respect to this, but if there was a substantial change, I would, given that we meet every 2 weeks, I would think that, depending on how substantive the change was, that it would come back to council. But I'm looking for thoughts or comments from members of council. Deputy Mayor Dayu?
Fully agree that we should be flexible and responsive, and I like the two models that you've proposed. My thinking would be a full delegation of authority within the confines of the financial limits that we've set. And then if there is argument to increase those limits, that's obviously when it would come back to council. But anything within the financial confines that we've set, for me, would be most appropriately discussed with the folks who know the subject best.
And we're talking about delegated authority to yourself, correct?
Yeah, that would be correct. I still, or we would still, Wendy and myself, probably still be bringing reports back, even if we executed agreement. But in conversations with her just briefly this morning over email, if we were just given the ability based on the two recommendations to amend the guidelines to the return to service agreement go from 4 years to 2 years, and give us the flexibility to stack the funding if that request comes to us. As you've noted, Warden, given the fact that council meets every 2 weeks, we probably wouldn't even really need the delegated authority, to be honest with you. But it just allows us, when we get those inquiries, we can say that council would be supportive of this proposal when we bring it forward to them. So
I would look for you to revise the guidelines and bring them back to council for our, final review, and go from there. Councilor Carter?
It's always difficult to pay for things before you get them. I think that somewhere in here it says it's, they're paid out on January 15th, so you're sort of paying for the year ahead of time. But paying the $50,000 you're paying now for a couple of years ahead of time. I hate it, but at the same time, if that's what it takes to be able to get it done, then I think that's, we have to bow down to the realities of the situation. So, I would support that.
They don't meet the terms of the agreement. They have to pay the money back and have had to do so.
Yep. But that means that, we have to go after them and so on. Look, it's the world we live in. So it's, there's not much we can do. The only other point I wanted to make was on the Appendix A, at the end where you talked about giving priority to applicants who would be willing to work and emerge and so on. I think he called the full scope of rural family practice. No, not you. I mean, those were words written long before you, I would imagine. But I think it's important to know that along with family medicine, we also have the long-term care, we have inpatient coverage, we have memory clinics, we have counseling. It's not only emerge as one of those things. So I think you need to just say in the, in rural family practice, because, I do everything we can to maybe help with, Triple HS with their emergency room situation, but that's their situation. We've got to handle all the other things that we need to be dealing with in getting primary care physicians here. This is and some just don't want to work emerge. Some people love it, some people hate it. So why let's just not put another hurdle in trying to acquire people. So
Other comments? Okay, well, we look forward to bringing that back to us, and if I could have a mover and a seconder to receive the report. Councilors McKechnie and Dayu.
Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receive staff report EDT 06-2024 doctor recruitment guidelines and amendments, and for the Director of Economic Development and Tourism be directed to bring back the amended guidelines and parameters for approval of delegated authority to council for further consideration.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks, Scott. Next, under other administrative reports, we have an official plan amendment. Good morning, Mr. Kozlowski.
Thank you, Warden. Morning, Council. I did provide prepare a slide deck that has a summary of some of the policies, which IT will bring up shortly. But just by introduction, Minden Hills has recently amended its official plan, and that's official plan amendment number 17, which I'll refer to as OPA 17, just a little bit less to say. And as you know, County Council is the approval authority for official plan amendment applications. And just for background, so County Official Plan Amendment number 1, which was passed in the fall of 2023, implemented the Provincial Bill 23 and Bill 108, which allows for additional residential units on properties. And again, this is a means of gentle intensification of the villages and hamlets, and provides additional rental accommodations in rural areas. And as we know, last month, Dysart also amended its official plan, and that was approved by the county. First slide. So I just have some bullet points up on the screens here. So OPA number 17, with respect to additional dwelling units, the main change here was a new section 5.19, which was added. And there's a criteria of requirements for what we'll call ADUs. And so it's broken down into 2 areas. There's the Minden serviced area, and then there's the rest of the municipality, the rural areas and the rural hamlets and smaller villages. So in Minden, where there's water and sewer, 2 additional dwelling units where residential use is permitted are permitted as of right. And this can be broken down as either 2 apartments in the main house, or you can have 1 apartment in the house and then 1 apartment in an accessory building. And the criteria also includes the ADU has to comply with zoning, and it has to meet all OBC and fire code requirements, and has to be on a public year-round maintained road. Next slide. So then moving into the rural areas and the rural settlement areas where there are no services, 2 ADUs are permitted under the same criteria, 2 in the main house, or 1 in the main house, 1 in an accessory building. The main difference in the rural areas now is that the minimum lot size required is 1 hectare or 2.5 acres. However, there are mechanisms here where if somebody does have less than 1 hectare, there is an option to apply for a rezoning, and that rezoning would require a technical study, basically a hydrogeological study, just to verify that water supply is there in the aquifer, and that the additional septic loading will not pollute the groundwater supply in the area. And as with the Minden serviced area, the ADU also has to comply with zoning, OBC, fire code, and be on a year-round maintained road. Next slide. And finally, the other administrative amendments that are, we'll call them accessory to the ADU amendments, are there's various sections of the official plan where secondary suites and accessory apartments were listed as permitted uses. That wording has now been replaced with additional dwelling units now being a permitted use. And finally, prohibitions. So the Dysart policies were very similar to this. So additional dwelling units are not permitted in the waterfront designation, and all are not permitted within 300 meters of an at capacity lake trout lake. One additional policy control here is that additional dwelling units may not contain or be used as a bed and breakfast establishment. Just before I move on to the other amendments, are there any questions about the specific ADU policy amendments?
I've got a couple of questions. When you say that they won't be used as a bed and breakfast, does that include short-term rentals? Because that to me is somewhat problematic.
So bed and
To me,
breakfast,
it's problematic. You can shake your head, but
They're different definitions.
I know they're different definitions.
yeah, so a bed and breakfast is a very specific use in the zoning bylaw and in the official plan. So a bed and breakfast is typically the owner lives in the home, they have a room out for rent, but it's not a separate dwelling unit. And so what Minden Hills is deemed appropriate is that, an accessory residential unit can't be used as a B and B. But that's separate from short-term rental.
I guess I would have thought that it would not be used as a short-term rental either.
The language is specific to bed and breakfast establishments. But good point, though. Something
There
to-
has also been some discussion in other municipalities about a secondary, actually full secondary residential unit on a residential property, rural property, sorry, if there is sufficient land. Is that something that's allowed in Minden, or you're just talking strictly about apartments?
It's specific to apartments. So the Planning Act is very specific. It doesn't allow two standalone homes on a property. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody can apply for an official plan amendment or zoning amendment to attempt to do that. But the intent of this legislation was for apartments within an existing primary dwelling or an accessory dwelling.
Questions from other members of council? Okay, carry on.
Okay. Now, there were some other amendments to OPA 17 in some different topic areas. So there are some shoreline policy updates, and the previous policy in the Minden Hills plan allowed 30% of the shoreline area of a property to be used as an amenity area, and that's been amended to a maximum of 25%. And that's to bring the policy in line with the county shoreline bylaw, which allows maximum 25%. And for shoreline setbacks, so the Minden Hills plan did allow, it does have policies for redevelopment of existing non-compliant structures. So these are houses that may be in a required setback, but it wasn't clear on whether setbacks could be further reduced. And the policy amendment now is very specific in that it says that no further reduction of an existing shoreline setback is permitted. So if somebody has a cottage that's within the required front yard, they can replace it or expand it, but cannot go any closer to the lake. And that policy amendment just provides very distinct clarity on that regard.
Question from Councillor Rail.
Sure.
So that would be in where that applies would be in a situation where the building is already infringing and now they cannot move any closer to the lake. If they weren't, in other words, if they were 30 meters back, 40 meters back, whatever is beyond it, and they wanted to move another 3 or 4 feet or meters forward, that wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, as long as it complies with zoning.
Okay.
Yeah. And bed and breakfast establishments. So this, again, there's an amendment to the policy that provides additional clarity, and that clarification is that a B&B may only occur as an accessory use within a principal dwelling. The previous policy, I believed it wasn't as explicit as that, the wording. And the final policy amendments are under the consent lot criteria for lot creation. One amendment was a wording amendment. The plan at the time said that new lot creation has to front on a township road. The word township's been dropped, and to include any type of road, whether it's provincial, county, or municipally maintained, as long the intent here is that it's year-round maintained. Next slide. Okay, and the final, this is a new amendment, a new section that's been added. The Minden Hills plan did not have a policy regarding controlling development within 1 kilometer of a settlement boundary. And that's now been added, and that aligns with the county's policy, which we amended back in the fall as part of County OPA 1, which provides additional flexibility when we're considering these types of apps. So now Minden Hills does have a 1,000 meter policy around settlements, and that brings it into conformity with the county plan. So just in conclusion, the amendments that have been reviewed, they are in conformity with the county official plan as amended. There were 2 public meetings held at Minden Hills, June 29th and July 27th of 2023, and was approved by Minden Hills on February 8th, 2024. The county did hold a 30-day comment period, which ran from April 8th to May 8th, and we did not receive any correspondence or concerns about the amendment. And staff recommend approval without modification, and I'd be happy to answer any further questions.
Thank you, Adam. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, could I have a mover and a seconder to approve the amendments, Councillor Speary and McKechnie?
Be it resolved that planning report PLN 08/2024 concerning file number 4616 OPA 17, which is in relation to the official plan number 17 to the Township of Minden Hills official plan, be received by Haliburton County Council, and that Haliburton County Council approves in its entirety without modification official plan number 17 to the Township of Minden Hills official plan that was adopted by the Council of the Township of Minden Hills on February 8, 2024 by bylaw 24-017.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, sir. Next is a report on surface treatment projects. Morning, Sil.
Morning, Warden, members of council. My report today is in regards to the surface treatment RFT that was advertised, released, sorry. In collaboration with 3 of the local municipalities, the county took a lead in releasing a surface treatment tender. The county portion of the tender included 2.4 kilometers of single surface, 7.4 kilometers of double surface. The RFT closed on May 7th. 2 bids were received, one from Miller Paving and one from Dufferin Construction. The county portion for Miller was $1,145,000, and the Dufferin Construction tender was $1,162,000. The bids were checked for compliance, which Miller Paving was low bid and are being recommended for award. The county portion, including non-recoverable HST, was $1,165,000, which was $15,740 over our allocated 24 budget. Staff are recommending that the shortfall be covered by the savings on the hot mix tender results, which was a total of $379,000. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? It's really great to see 3 of the municipalities going in with the county on this project. If there are no questions, could I have a mover and a seconder to approve the contract? And we'll see a bylaw. Councillors Carter and Fury.
Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received for information the May 22nd, 2024 staff report, 2024 service treatment road rehabilitation projects, and that Haliburton County Council approved the contract for the 2024 surface treatment road rehabilitation projects be awarded to Miller Paving Limited for the amount of $1,145,000 plus applicable taxes. And finally, that staff be directed to present a bylaw authorizing the warden and clerk to execute the agreement.
All in favor? That's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is a report on correspondence.
Good morning, Warden Danielson and members of council. Included on the agenda for council's consideration this morning is a resolution that the clerk's department received from the town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury. The resolution is seeking council support to not phase out free well water testing as part of the proposed streamlining efforts of public health laboratory operations in the province.
Comments? It's a little bit different process. From my perspective, normally it's a member of council who asks for support as opposed to the request for support coming from the clerk's department, but I guess is there any comment from yourself?
Thank you, Warden Daniel. So it was just a matter of, given the impact of this resolution with respect to the community at large, we thought it was important to bring it, to highlight it for council's direction with respect to not only the resolution itself, but the impact it directly has on Haliburton County residents.
Comments, questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder then to support the recommendation? Councillors Dayu and Shell.
Be it resolved, that Haliburton County Council acknowledges receipt of the May 15th, 2024 correspondence from the town of Bradford, West Gwillimbury, and the Haliburton County Council concurs with the resolution and that further staff be directed to forward correspondence indicating council support.
All in favor? That's carried. Next are the reports and minutes from external boards and agencies. First, the Fourth Pine Ridge Health Unit. Any comment there, Councillor Rail?
Yeah, I'll just give you a quick update on where we are. Current priorities, 2023, 2024 respiratory season. The big flashback again. So although there's still occurrences of the 2024 respiratory season is starting to come to a close. So although there are still occurrences of COVID-19, influenza, and RSV activity, the levels now are starting to decline and falling into the normal trend of where they would be at this time of the year. School immunization under the ISPA enforcement. On March the 4th, 3,596 letters were sent to families with kids that had missing ISPA records. On April the 29th, 1,776 were still outstanding. And on May the 14th, 663 were suspended. As of May the 16th, 345 students were still suspended. It is expected that the outstanding number will drop significantly this week because that was of last week. So this program is extremely important to the rise of measles outbreaks across North America, and virtually all occurrences of measles have been in non-vaccinated children, and all measles deaths occurred with kids that were not vaccinated. So this is something we need to deal with. Opioid drugs, the large occurrences of product contamination of non-fentanyl is still there. I'm not sure what, if anything, anybody can do about it, but it's basically poison put into the product. Recently, the food insecurity program has been looked at. This is kind of interesting because it'll probably be done in conjunction with the Peterborough Public Health, because it'll be the first project that will come forward. And what it's looking at is the relationship between food insecurity, that is, people can't have enough money to buy effective food, and mental disorder diseases and chronic infections and stuff like that. So what we've found so far is in the last 2 years, virtually nothing has changed within the Haliburton, within the HKPR district. And what that means is it ain't getting any better. So that's kind of sort of the way it is. With the potential merger, Doctors Bocking and Piggott met with the province to review the next steps. Nothing outstanding to report. Funding approval is tentative for the end of June or early July. But again, that's not firm. That's what we've been told. Staff are continuing to further look at the composition and service scope review of the new unit. They're comparing current staff descriptions and scope of work at both units. So what do the people do? And in addition to that, what do the units support? And so comparing the scope of delivery in both units regarding urban, rural, and Indigenous needs. So comparing those units needs to be related to the provincial health standard requirements versus what those actual communities need. So they don't always fall in sync. Sometimes it could be referred to as scope creep, but not really. It's what the people need. So having said that, So no major structural changes will be made until the provincial financial approval has been received. And additional merger meetings are scheduled, one more at least this month, so to see where we are with where we are. And again, some of the changes that are being looked at are more related to communication, improving the communication between the two health units, regardless of whether they merge or not. There's a lot of stuff that has been uncovered that a better communication system would have solved had we have had it at that time. That's it.
Questions for Councillor Ryle? Thank you, sir. Any updates or information you'd like to bring forward on point in time? Councillor
Yeah, thank you. Yes, a couple of things to mention. First is, in the last number of months, point in time, Board of Directors has put out a call for additional board members to apply, and we have had an extraordinary response of experienced, talented people bringing the strength of the board up immeasurably in the years to come, and hopefully all of the applicants will be appointed at the year annual AGM coming up in June. So that's very, very good news for the Board of Directors. And we've had a few bits and pieces of statistics that I wanted to bring to your attention as well, because they are really interesting. In the last fiscal year, point in time, served a total of 787 clients, which is cumulative, unduplicated. And this is over the previous year's client total of 713. So that's quite an uptick in number of people served. It's hard to know exactly why there's been that uptick. It could be because our population is growing, but there are also other very interesting statistics about outreach. There have been, for example, 52 newspaper articles and radio interviews in the last fiscal year, exceeding the target of 30. There have also been an uptick in e-blast engagement reach over the last 4 quarters from a benchmark rate of 25% to up to 47%. And these are all really interesting statistics because they could account in part for why Point in Time is seeing a higher level of clients, which is good all around. It doesn't necessarily mean that vulnerability in the county is getting automatically higher. It means that we are reaching more people, and the degree to which those two balance out is impossible to know from these statistics, but they're doing their job, and that's the important thing.
Any questions for Councillor Dayan? Thank you. Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus is due to meet tomorrow afternoon, so I will have more information to impart after that. I believe that our CAO would like to speak to the request for support for the communal decentralization of water and wastewater solutions.
Thank you, Warden Danielson. The request for support from the EWC comes out of the project from the County of Frontenac with respect to the creation of housing units on communal systems on a new system. It's a much more affordable way for housing. However, so it's a very good project, and as it's defined in Frontenac, while I support the aspect of looking at the use of communal systems for facilitation of affordable housing in Haliburton County, I think prior to fully endorsing the piece going forward in official plans, I think it's prudent that we look at what parameters we'd be willing to accept communal systems for development, what type of development, where, proximity to existing serviced areas, things of that nature. So I would respectfully request of council that the matter be referred back to the new planning director for a report back onto what those parameters would look like for council's consideration at a future meeting.
Any comments or questions? Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I think the almost the most interesting thing about the presentation we had a couple of weeks ago was the whole idea of the processes and the steps that you need to go through to be able to not only do these types of infrastructure, but also the setting up the corporation or how it's going to be managed in the future. So, that's I think it's very important what you just brought up about the local details and the local knowledge, but it would still be nice for them to put together that the step-by-step process of everything they had to go through and what problems they've had so far.
As a follow-up, Warden Danielson, exactly, Councillor Carter, I agree. I think the the County of Frontenac's done an amazing job in the program they put together for the two projects in their municipalities. So I think that information is available, and we'll make sure an outline has been included in the report back to council. But I think to your point, I think it's important that we receive inputs from the local municipalities on impact to local municipalities, but also on the broader county construct as well.
Thank you. Anything on joint social and housing services?
Yes, we had a meeting on May 15th. We actually started the meeting with reviewing a bit of a documentary on a framework to prevent and end homelessness, which is I think the one thing that it really brought to the fore is the interconnectivity between all of the various issues with homelessness, whether it be housing, it be mental health, it be a lot of the other social services and child services. Everything is interconnected, and none of these solutions are easy. But one of the things that I think the group has come together, coalesced, if you will, in the fact that we want to work together, and it was directed that Cheryl Faber and our CAO work together with the idea of putting together the possibilities of certain joint delegations that we would make with CKL at the AMO conference. Often, even last time we were back to back with CKL, and so this is an area that we share and have in common, and we thought that working together we may have a better voice with the government. So I'll turn it over to the CAO if he wants to comment further on that.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Warden Danielson. Yeah, so we have a meeting, I believe, next week, 2 weeks, with CKL, both the CAO and the director, social service director, to develop a framework for it. We'll present back to council on a possible joint delegation. I think it's a great opportunity to pool our resources, as mentioned earlier, about as they're stretched out over the Roma conference. So it'll give us a good opportunity to partner up with CKL and bring something forward on the social service side of piece as well. I think is important. And if I might take the opportunity, Councillor Carter, to mention the in-home childcare program that's been brought forward. So we were advised by CKL a couple weeks ago that there's an agency looking to support the development of additional in-home daycare, or excuse me, childcare spaces across Haliburton County. The agency would be centered in Haliburton County, so be focused directly in providing up to, I believe, up to 120 to 125 new in-home daycare spaces or childcare spaces, and that. So what we've done, with great cooperation from the local municipalities, we put together a centralized intake team that will receive the applications from the support group, walk them through the process they need, so they're getting consistent recommendations and information, not irrespective of whichever municipality they're going to locate in. I do have to compliment Tamara at DISART for the amount of work she's put in putting a kind of a foundation for us on that for the group going forward. So hopefully we'll report back on that in the near future to council.
With respect to bringing something back to council on the delegation, the joint delegation, do we have time for that? What's the deadline for delegation submissions?
I believe it's June 4th or 14th. I'd have to check my notes, but it's within the next couple of weeks.
But we don't meet until June the 12th.
Yeah. If with council's indulgence, I sent a note out to council a week or so ago. We're going to take my recommendation would be, unless something new comes up from council based on our last two delegation sessions at Roma and AMO, I would concentrate our staff resources efforts on the joint delegations on the social services side of piece with CKL and focus on there. Unless there's another matter council would like us to look into.
Does that sound satisfactory to council?
Yeah,
Councillor
Could
Carter?
Yeah, just add not only social services, but housing also, because
correct.
that's
Right.
very much a part of all this. And then also determining exactly which ministry we need to be talking to on some of these, because it's a little bit, it's not, housing, is, sometimes some of the issues are with the Solicitor General as opposed to the Minister for
Okay.
Housing.
Councillor Dayu?
I'm not sure if this is an appropriate moment then to say or not, but I've also had some conversations with our CEO of the Haliburton Library Board about how library services are modeled and supported by the province and how that hasn't changed for 20 years. When the auditor gave its presentation to the library board recently, I thought there were some revealing insights there about how difficult it is to fund and to model library services, which we all know in a place like this versus a much more centralized place. Really interesting and valuable insights. And I was hoping that we might take some of those and turn them into a delegation as an idea to put forward.
Thank you, Warren Danielson. I think that's a really good point, because this is an interesting one based on the discussions we had with the library earlier in the year. I think it's important for council to note and the public to notice the library funding from the province has been frozen since 1998. Which is bad enough unto itself. But the piece they don't tell you is that between 97 and 98, it was decreased by 20%. So it is something that the libraries are a valuable piece to our communities. And I think anything the province could do, or a province should do, is re-examine the funding formulas used for libraries as well as some other services, to take the burden off the municipalities to just become current with the funding formulas going forward.
Councillor Rail?
Yeah, I don't have much to add other than I would strongly support what Councillor Dio is suggesting. It's been, the only thing that hasn't happened is a funeral. Everything else has been basically closed, and nobody's looked at it in that period of time. So I think it's time to wake somebody up.
I will say that there have been several delegations made over the last dozen years about this particular issue, but that, I think the time is right to do it again. It's sinful that libraries are expected, and you could see the challenge that we had and that the library had this year with their funding model. And so can we agree then we will also do a delegation with respect to library funding? Okay. Thank you. I guess we would, I need a mover and a seconder then to receive the external reports and minutes. Councillors Carter and Rael.
Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council receives for information reports and minutes from external boards and agencies as published in the May 2024 County Council agenda.
All in favor? That's carried. Next is the Haliburton County Land Division. Welcome back.
Thank you. Just a brief summary, the Land Division Committee met on May 13th, and it was a relatively light agenda. We had 2 consent applications affecting the KC Willwater and geothermal property on Gellert Road. One of the applications was to create a new rural residential lot, and then the other application at the south end of the property was for a boundary adjustment with a neighboring property. Those were both approved. And just in summary, to date, Land Division Committee has approved 21 consents, and we have all were approved. We have no deferrals, no denials, and no appeals. Next month, we have 7 applications.
Wow. Let's pick up the pace. Any questions on the Land Division? I could have a mover and a seconder to receive the report. Councillor Dayu and seconded by Councillor Burton.
Be it resolved that Haliburton County Council received planning report PLN 09-2024 entitled Land Division Activity Report for May 2024 as information.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks, Adam. Yeah, no, I got that under. Other external boards and agencies, first up is the CPAC update. And go ahead, Councillor Burton.
If I may, I believe the CAO had some comments, your worship.
He does? You'd like to go ahead with that?
Thank you. Thank you, Warden Danielson. Just for council's update on the OPP detachment board, the new Haliburton County OPP detachment board. Just advise that all council representatives have now fulfilled the training requirements as identified under the act. So we're ready to proceed. And also I sent a note quickly to council last week. We received, I think it was on the 15th of May, we received notification from the Solicitor General's office that the provincial appointee was announced for Haliburton County Detachment Board, and it's Andrew Hodgson. Ms. Tiffin, who is the Secretary Treasurer of the new board, has been in contact with Mr. Hodgson to make sure he's been enrolled in his training going forward. So you should be getting a notice going out to the members for the inaugural meeting the week of June 24th. Ms. Tiffin and I are still trying to figure out what the date works, but we're shooting for the week of June 24th. And also Sue's been hard at work in putting together the package for the meeting. I think it's important to note. So will be the draft procedural bylaw, the board terms of reference, code of conduct, the further training responsibilities that are coming from the province will be brought forward at that time. And the board will be asked to appoint a chair at that time to allow us to move going forward. And discussion with respect to the appointment of the community representative for the detachment board that's still outstanding as to what focus, how that's going to be done. I think the last time council spoke, council had directed that let the committee meet and then they'll recommend back to council what that process should look like. So we're going to try to get that done on that meeting in June. And also receive direction with respect to the county representative seat, because there was discussion as to whether or not that should be maintained or ask the province to transfer that into an additional community member for the detachment board. So that's kind of the basis of the discussion going forward. And just lastly, I would note that I believe that through the budget process, we've allocated an operating budget of roughly around $20,000 for the detachment board and to get it up and running for 2024, 2025.
Questions or comments?
Sorry, just
Go ahead.
question.
Sorry.
So along with what is going to be a very full meeting, it would be interesting to maybe hear from the OPP as to what they're expecting from it. In terms of like what do they, other than, we have the general things about, we're going to be talking about, the strategic plan and so on and so forth, but the more nuts and bolts types of things like, complaint resolutions, whatever those may be, it would be interesting to at least hear what they would expect.
Thank you. Through you, Warden Danielson, to Councillor Carter. Yeah, so the part of the piece is reaching out with Inspector Flindle to establish just what you're talking about, and that would be developed into the crafting a formal terms of reference or mandate for the board that will identify all those things with respect to, and it'll be an iterative approach in the sense that we'll also take the opportunity to make sure that council is getting what they expect out of the board, the new board, as well as the public is getting the expectation of what they expect out of the new board as well. And through that interaction and engagement, we can continually grow the terms of reference or the mandate for the board to make sure we're achieving our goals. And one thing I did forget to mention is we're also be building, while it is well known to the members of council sitting on the board, for the new community members, I think as well, to a certain extent, the OPP representatives on the board is familiarity with the community safety well-being plan for the county, because that's a key element of the board mandate going forward. So that will be included in the package. Yes, it'll be a very full meeting, but I think we're off to a good start with the foundation piece of it going forward.
I'm glad you brought the point up about hearing the expectations of the OPP as well. I know that there has been a bit of a question about who's steering the ship. Is it the OPP? Is it the board? It's, and I think that hopefully that will be made clear at the meeting. The one question that I have, I understood that council had directed that we wanted our council representative to be a second member of the public. And I didn't realize that the thinking was that we would wait until the board met to give that direction. I thought that we could do that. I kind of thought that was in motion.
Yes. So if I misunderstood council direction, I apologize. It's not a simple process because the composition of the board was identified in the OREGs to the legislation. We have to go back to the cabinet board secretariat to modify the OREG to take the county rep off and put it as a community. I don't expect it to be onerous. I'm thinking standpoint that they will agree with us. It's not a simple process in timeline standpoint. So we can start that process if that's the direction of council right now, and just inform the board. I'll acquiesce to council's direction on that.
Thoughts from council? Council Carter?
I think we should start this and get this going and established, and then decide whether or not we want to then make that second member another member of the public. I mean, let's get the first, if you will, almost couple of meetings under our belt to get the terms of reference and all that established, because we have to decide, for instance, now that the provincial rep is from Dysart, does that mean that the county rep can't also be from Dysart, so that we don't have 3 members from Dysart there? Or, I don't know if that's even important, but it's, they're all the things that we need to consider in the process, right?
Well, and that's my consideration when it comes to the additional council representation, because we now have 2 representatives from Algonquin Highlands.
Right.
On the board, which, is it a problem or not? I mean, as far as the individuals are concerned, it's not. But, it raises the question about representation. And to me, there should actually be greater representation from either Minden or Haliburton, because of greater population, more issues. But, I mean, you're right. Let's walk before we start to run. Councillor Dayu?
It's my opinion, though, that hands down, we need more people on the board with greater lived experience, greater access to the vulnerable members of our community who are going to be potentially more face-to-face with some of these services. I think that, for me, is bare bones. Got to try to do it if we can. So I'm very much in support of getting that ball rolling before we start meeting.
Yeah, that's kind of what my understanding of the discussion that we'd had earlier was, that it's more important to have, or it's extremely important to have members of the public involved, more so than 5 members of county council. So I'm looking, I mean, we've got a couple of thoughts on the floor, looking for other comments. Councillor Burton, you look like you've got a comment.
Well, I'd be certainly supporting moving forward right now.
Okay, can we agree to moving on forward on that? I'm seeing nodding heads. Okay.
Thank you. Just one thing, if I might add one last thing, sorry.
Absolutely.
Is the comment with respect to who's running the board. I think it's very important for the public to where this is actually a community-based board, and that's what the purpose for it be established, and why I think the extra community member is a benefit to the board. It is, from an accountability, transparency standpoint, it's responsiveness to the needs of the community. So the police are there as a resource, and police are there to provide information to the board, and there's certain legislative parameters in there, but it truly is a community-driven entity.
Thank you. Next on the agenda are the EORN update. We did have EORN here at our last meeting. There's an EORN meeting scheduled for the 30th of the month, which I cannot attend. I seem to have three directions to travel in that day, and one is the hospital board, the other is emergency measure training, so I won't be able to attend the EORN, but I will be able to bring an update after the meeting, because I believe they will be speaking to their strategic plan, as will the Warden's Caucus also be speaking to that tomorrow. Anything under poverty reduction?
Yes. Yes, there was a meeting and it was in Minden and it was 12 out of the very large group of 59 that's on that committee. And actually, they just share information. That's what they don't really try to accomplish anything except they keep all the groups involved, which is every organization in the county that has anything to do with poverty or mental health or all of the things that we talk about here. So it is an interesting concept, but it's very large. And they meet again in June the 1st in Lindsay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, under other businesses where we have slotted the report on waste management. So if you'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Warden Dennison. At the our previous council meeting, the county council received a submission or a presentation from Dillon and Associates with respect to the consideration of moving to a single tier service delivery model and methodology for waste management across Haliburton County. The direction of county council at the time was to refer it back to the local municipalities for consideration and comment. I can report that all four of the local municipalities have reviewed and have received the Dillon report and have selected the option of maintaining current collaborative efforts between the four municipalities for waste management going forward. One thing I think it's important to note, there was some commentary at the presentation with respect to had alternative methodologies for waste management been considered as part of the study. That was not part of the scope of work for the Dillon report, so that's why it wasn't touched upon. However, if council wishes us to go forward with that, simply be a direction from council, and we can, at a staff level, we can prepare documentation to bring back to council for consideration information. I think there's merits in looking at alternative methodologies, as if nothing else, to remain current and efficient, and making sure we're doing it the most efficient way going forward, not from an operational governance standpoint, but actually keeping update with modern technologies, as opposed to just burying all our garbage in the ground. With that, I'll leave it to council to.
I think you've heard some encouraging words, over the last few meetings that in urging council to look at incineration. I would welcome staff doing some a little bit of advanced research and bringing a report back to council and moving forward with looking at that. Council agree to that? Councillor Dayu?
Thanks. Yeah, I would very much appreciate staff input from the lower tier, certainly before we go to any potential idea of a consultant bringing that information forward, because I do, and I know that's not what you proposed, but because just in speaking with our own lower tier environmental services manager, there is a wealth of information there. And I think our staff have been doing a lot of this thinking already. And that would be the first thing I'd like to hear.
If I might, Warden.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's supposed to be a fact-finding piece based on the information we have. There are current models within Ontario. There's a number of models in the European European theater, if you will. So that would be the first step, is going through and doing a fact-finding piece and bringing back more like a white paper, if you will, on alternative waste solutions for Alberta County.
At which point there's absolutely no question that the lower tiers would be fully involved. Councillor Ryle?
Yeah, I think what you're saying is absolutely true. This is going to become one of the most controversial subjects we've come up with in a long time, if we choose to investigate incineration. That doesn't mean we're for it or against it. It merely means there's going to be a lot of discussion over it. And any white paper or any similar type fact-finding mission, I think is the right thing to do, so we get the rules of how it works. That's not what I meant to say. The actual challenges and advantages of how it works. clearly defined before we start getting a lot of emails on the pros and cons of what people think of it.
I'm not sure we could become any more controversial than shoreline preservation and short-term rentals, but let's take a crack at it. Counselor McKechnie. And did I see your hand up, Counselor Carter? Counselor McKechnie.
Yeah, needless to say, I'm quite passionate about another alternative to our landfill site issue. And behind the scenes, I have been talking to a lot of people and done a lot of research, and there's definitely some like things have really improved in regard to the product that's out there. And like the landfill sites all around us are being closed. Of course, they're going to be trucked down the highway. I think that is going to end too someday soon, because the price is going to become so high to truck it. And also the people that are taking the garbage are going to say, you know, we don't want it any longer. I think there's going to come a time here real soon that we have to start being responsible for our own garbage. And I think the only way you do that is the model that especially Sweden and Norway have been following for the last 50 years. I know there's a lot of products out there, but I know that in Norway, there's a company that builds incinerators that will get rid of anywhere from 15 tons to 2 million tons. There's one in Singapore they built for there. So there is such advancement in the biggest question is, of course, is polluting our environment. And I am 100% against that. So I think that that there is an opportunity here for somebody to be the pioneer here to start in rural Ontario. We need to start thinking about another alternative here really soon, because, you know, needless to say, these landfill sites are closing. Just ask Simcoe County. 3 of them were announced in April at a council meeting. At 24, 25, and 30. That's when 3 are going to be, they're full, so they have to start trucking. And that's not a very good thing for the environment. So I'm really positive about Gary getting the rest of the community and all our staff involved. And let's try to, whether it's here or some place close to here, somehow we got to have an incinerator to get rid of our garbage. That's my opinion. Thank you.
So council's in concurrence that we bring a report back. Do we have a resolution for that?
If you might, I think I would prefer.
I would too. If you'd like to read us what you've got.
That CAO report, CAO 004-2024 be received, and further that the CAO be directed to strike a staff working group to investigate alternative waste management methodologies for discussion purposes, and further that the fact-finding report be brought back to County Council for review and discussion at the September meeting of County Council.
All in favor? Oh, sorry, mover. Councillor McKechnie, seconder, Councillor Rael. All in favor? Thank you.
Sorry, Warden. It would be any chance that any of the council would like to do this? I know that I'm going to do it, along with anybody else on our staff or our council at Dysart. But going down to Durham and having a tour, I've been told that it is really informative. It really gets your eyes open of how advanced it is in regard to safe environment. It's supposed to be quite a wide. It opens your eyes up really wide about how negative. There's a lot of people are so negative on it, but it's very successful, and I'd be really interested in. I know I'm going to go, but if we got enough, maybe we'd have to get a bus. But now we'd drive. Just want to know if anybody else would be interested. Thank you.
Gary and Councillor Day.
I think as part of our gathering the information, I think we can undertake the direction to organize a tour. There's a couple of facilities that we could look at. We can be part of our minute coming back to organize tour on behalf of County Council, both at the staff and the elected level, if that's the pleasure of council.
Thank you. Councillor Dayu?
Absolutely interested. I think for my own edification, I'd prefer to do it after we receive the staff report so that we understand that model in relation to all of the other models that are being considered.
Okay, so we're agreed on that. Next are the bylaws. If I could have a mover and a seconder to approve the bylaw for Miller paving. Councillors Burton and Carter.
Be it resolved that bylaw 4248 being a bylaw to authorize an agreement with Miller Paving Limited for the surface treatment of various sections of county roads be considered. Be read a first, second, and third time.
All in favor? That's carried. Are there any notice of motion? Just to let council know that we will likely be over the next couple of months planning a couple of special meetings. One to just take a look at the service delivery review, where we are with that and how we would like to go forward with that. And the other is with respect to strategic planning process. Just to let you know about that. And could I have a mover and a seconder for the confirming bylaw? Councillors Fury and Carter.
Be it resolved that bylaw 4249 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the May 22nd, 2024 meeting of Haliburton County Council be considered to be read a first, second, and third time.
All in favor? That's carried. Finally, motion to adjourn. Councillor McKechnie, Councillor Rao.
Be it resolved that the May 22nd, 24 meeting of Haliburton County Council be adjourned at 11:49 a.m.
All in favor? That's carried.